There was a moment, just a flicker of one, when everything felt too perfect. The kind of perfect that feels staged. I was standing in my living room, still wearing the navy suit Helen insisted I put on. She'd even tied my tie that morning, humming like she used to 20 years ago, back when we still made love on the kitchen floor after too much wine. Now, she barely touched me. But this morning, her hands lingered just a second too long on my collar. Not lovingly. Measured. Like she was dressing up a doll. My retirement party was scheduled for 6 p.m. sharp. She called it a surprise, but I had known something was coming. People don't cook two kinds of brisket and rent out a hall without dropping hits. Still, the word retirement made my chest tighten. 35 years at Allen and Keene. Half my life building logistics frameworks that no one outside the company would ever hear about. I gave them everything: early mornings, canceled holidays, ulcer surgery. And now? I was being applauded out the door with a gold-plated clock and a room full of plastic smiles. Helen had been different lately. More makeup. She was suddenly wearing perfume again, the same scent she used when we first dated, back when she worked at the law firm downtown, and I thought she was the most ambitious, sharp-witted woman I'd ever met. That scent haunted me now. She'd been going out more. Pilates. Wine nights with her book club. Every week, a new event. I joked about it once, asked if she'd joined a secret society. She just smiled and said, "Maybe I have, old man." I should have known. I did know. But denial is a warm blanket, and I had wrapped myself in it for too long. That morning, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it. I respected her privacy, or maybe I was just afraid of what I might find. But something in me moved. Instinct, or maybe the ghost of a younger me screaming from somewhere deep. The message on the screen was short, but it shattered everything. I can't wait till tonight. Finally, no more pretending. I love you. Z. Z. That was new. My stomach dropped through the floor. I didn't open the phone. Didn't need to. The words burned through the glass like acid. I sat down on the edge of the bed, clutching my knees like a child. My breath felt stuck in my throat. I stared at the bathroom door, hearing her hum some Fleetwood Mac song behind the running water. She was cheating on me. Not just cheating, planning something. Tonight. I thought I'd be furious. I thought I'd storm in, scream, throw the phone at her feet and demand answers. But instead, a terrifying stillness came over me. My mind didn't race, it focused. Something snapped into place inside me, sharp and cold. I stood up, walked into the closet, pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in years, and opened it. Inside was the name of an account. Offshore. Registered in both our names. Back when I'd been consulting for a company in Dubai for 3 months, Helen had insisted we move the bonuses somewhere tax-safe. She'd done all the paperwork. Said she wanted to be involved. That account had sat untouched for nearly 8 years, quietly accruing value. A detail forgotten, but not anymore. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but I felt it, deep in my bones. This wasn't going to end with me shaking hands over cold chicken skewers. No. She was setting a stage for something cruel, and she thought I'd walk right into it like a good, clueless husband. But Helen forgot something. I've been quietly studying people my entire life. Logistics is about flow, predicting bottlenecks, friction points, vulnerabilities. And today, Helen became just another system to dismantle. I sat there for a long time, staring at that folder, while Helen stepped out of the bathroom, her skin dewy, wrapped in the towel I bought her on our 10th anniversary. She kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. But something had. She didn't know it yet. But the man she married, the one who forgave too much, talked too little, trusted too blindly, he was gone. The venue Helen picked was too polished, too rehearsed. Crystal chandeliers, muted jazz from a live trio in the corner, perfectly arranged rows of white chairs facing a faux marble stage. She'd rented out the community center's ballroom, one of those places used for city council galas and overpriced weddings. It was the kind of venue where people smiled with their teeth, but not their eyes. As soon as I walked in, the clapping started. Too loud, too coordinated. Co-workers I hadn't seen in years stood up like marionettes, clapping and whistling. My old supervisor from the Chicago expansion was there, even though he was let go 5 years ago. Helen had really gone all out. She met me at the entrance in a red dress I hadn't seen before. tight in all the ways that screamed desperation more than elegance. It hugged her curves like it was trying to suffocate her conscience. She leaned in to kiss my cheek and whispered, "Try to act surprised." Her tone sent a chill through me. Smooth, playful, but calculated. This wasn't a party. It was a performance. And I was the final act. I smiled wide and played along. Shook hands, laughed, thanked people I barely remembered. But under that mask, my mind was turning over every detail like gears in a well-oiled machine. She was putting on a show, all right. And that meant she wanted something. Attention? Sympathy? Or was this some warped power play? One final knife before walking away clean? Then I saw him, standing near the punch table, pretending to examine a tray of mini quiches he had no intention of eating. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Tan, square-jawed, just a touch too polished. His suit looked expensive, but not earned. His posture screamed arrogance. Like the whole room was a stage, and he was waiting for his cue. He didn't approach me. Of course not. He wouldn't be that stupid. But he looked at Helen. Twice. And she looked back. It wasn't long. Maybe 3 seconds. But it was enough. The way her lips tightened, how her hand brushed her collarbone. Familiar. Subtle. Intimate. I filed that look away like evidence in a trial. And in that moment, I knew exactly who Z was. My wife had invited her lover to my retirement party. Let that sink in. He was here, breathing the same air as me, drinking the wine I paid for, basking in applause meant for my life's work. He even wore a lapel pin that said City Planning Commission. A government boy, probably the one she'd mentioned offhand weeks ago, some consultant on the board she met at a zoning meeting. Back then, I didn't think much of it. She made it sound boring. Paperwork and permits. Turns out, she had been zoning all right. Zoning out of our marriage. I excused myself from a conversation with my old HR director and walked to the back patio for air. The summer heat was thick, but I needed space. I leaned against the railing, watching the street. My hands were steady. Too steady. She thought I'd crumble. That I'd be too shocked, too overwhelmed to respond. That she'd serve the papers, make a dramatic speech, cry crocodile tears about growing apart, and still come out looking like the gracious, heartbroken wife. But that offshore account, that account had teeth. And so did I. I called someone. Quietly. Quickly. An old acquaintance from my audit days. IRS field rep, semi-retired but sharp as ever. I told him about the party, the account, the signatures, both mine and Helen's. I mentioned she'd recently moved large chunks of money in and out of it under the radar. He didn't ask why I was telling him this. He just asked one question. You want me to show up? I said yes. He said, then smile until I get there. So I did. I turned around, walked back into that room like nothing had happened, and raised a glass of Pinot to the air. The show was only beginning. And my part? I was about to steal it. I kept my smile sharp, tight at the corners like a knife wrapped in velvet. The moment I stepped back into the hall, Helen was already guiding someone to the mic stand, her boss from the zoning office, or maybe just a pawn in her little theater. The guy looked like he had rehearsed every word of his speech twice in the mirror. Maybe more. She clung to his arm like a proud co-director watching her play unfold, lips pressed into a demure smile that screamed, "Look how perfect I am." I wasn't watching him, though. My eyes were on Z. He stood near the dessert table now, speaking to a woman from the parks committee, feigning interest in raspberry tarts. But his gaze flicked toward Helen like a compass. Every few seconds. Like clockwork. I walked over to the bar and ordered a club soda. The bartender, a young guy with nervous energy and a man bun, handed it to me like he was scared to be part of whatever drama he felt buzzing in the air. That's the thing about betrayal. Even when it's hidden, it hums. It shifts the weight of the room. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A simple text. Inside. Back row. Tan blazer. You'll know when. My friend had arrived. IRS rep. Punctual. Discreet. Lethal in the right setting. I glanced back. There he was, gray-haired, clean-shaven, wearing that generic government bland look that lets him blend into any crowd. No one noticed him. That's what made him dangerous. Helen had no idea that the man sipping iced tea near the back table could dismantle her entire financial fantasy. And she was about to step onto the stage. The mic whined softly as she took it. She waited for the applause to settle, graceful, glowing, pretending to hold back tears. I just want to say, she began, voice shaking ever so slightly, how proud I am of my husband. 35 years with the same company. 35 years of loyalty, dedication, and she paused for effect, looking directly at me, unshakable integrity. A wave of polite laughter rolled through the room. I tilted my head and sipped my soda. I know this is his day, she continued, but I've also made a big decision, one I didn't want to make behind closed doors. I wanted to be honest, transparent. I heard murmurs, small, curious shifts in the audience. She was building tension, crafting her moment. I've filed for divorce. Gasps. Quiet ones. The kind that ripple. I'm not doing this out of anger, she lied, smooth as oil. Tom and I have just grown in different directions. He's been an incredible provider, an amazing father. We don't have kids, I wanted to shout. That was her choice, not mine. But we're both ready to move forward. Silence fell. Eyes turned toward me. And I stood. Slowly. Calmly. Walked up beside her on the stage. She glanced at me, startled. That wasn't part of the script. I reached for the mic. Thank you, Helen, I said. That was generous. And since we're being honest tonight, I think it's only fair I share something too. She narrowed her eyes slightly. Just for a split second. That flicker of panic. That oh no. I smiled. You all know Helen, I said to the crowd. Beautiful, brilliant, careful with the details. So careful, in fact, that 8 years ago, she insisted we open a joint offshore account. I felt the shift immediately. The energy cracked. Now, I didn't think much of it back then. She said it was for taxes, protection, retirement planning. We both signed the papers. Helen's face was frozen. Not fear, yet. But the tightening was there. Like a wire being pulled taut. That account sat for years. Quiet. Untouched. Until recently. I looked directly at her. Until Helen started moving money in and out of it. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Under both our names. People weren't breathing. The silence was vacuum tight. And since we're sharing tonight, I thought I'd invite a special guest to help us sort through the mess. In the back of the room, my friend stood. Tan blazer. Badge out. Helen's lips parted. No words. No movement. Just a flicker of sheer panic in her eyes. But this wasn't the moment. Not yet. I patted her shoulder, handed back the mic, and said softly so only she could hear. Surprise. She didn't say a word. Not then. Not as my fingers brushed hers when I handed her the mic. Not as the crowd slowly turned from her to the man, now stepping forward from the back. The man with the quiet walk and the glint of government steel behind his eyes. Not as her perfect facade started to fracture, line by invisible line. She stood there, red dress clinging to her like regret, one hand gripping the podium so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her lips moved once, like she might say something, but nothing came out. And I let the silence stretch. Let her feel it. Because silence, when heavy enough, can crush a person's image faster than 1,000 shouted accusations. My friend, let's call him Don, approached the stage with the slow, respectful air of a man who's already seen the end of the movie and knows exactly how it plays out. He didn't have to introduce himself. He just nodded once, tucked a leather folio under his arm, and turned his attention directly to Helen. I'd like a quick word after the program, he said, casual as if asking to borrow a pen. Should only take a few minutes. The air snapped like glass. You could feel it, the tension breaking off in shards. People began whispering. Someone in the front row turned in their seat, eyes wide. A woman near the cake table gasped, then tried to cover it up by pretending to sneeze. Helen blinked. Once. Twice. Still no words. I took the mic again. Let's not jump to conclusions, I said cheerfully, with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you've flipped the script so hard they don't even know which play they're in anymore. Tonight is about transition, about new beginnings. I gave the crowd my best tired smile performance. It landed. They chuckled nervously. Relief, discomfort. Some of them were already trying to convince themselves this was all just some elaborate retirement joke. And Helen? She was unraveling. It was in the way she laughed. Too loud, too sudden, grabbing the mic from me with this wild, fake energy. Okay. My husband's always been full of surprises, she said, voice pitched a little too high. Let's all get back to celebrating, all right? Then she turned to Don. But you'll have to forgive us. We weren't expecting, visitors from the IRS tonight. He smiled. And it was the kind of smile I've only ever seen on people who've already read the file. No worries, he said. I'll wait. She turned back to the crowd, trying to salvage what was left. Made some awkward joke about audits and retirement. People laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was that awkward, cringing kind of laughter people use when they're trapped somewhere they no longer want to be. And in that moment, I realized something vital. She wasn't just humiliated. She was cornered. And the thing about Helen, the thing I'd ignored for years, is that when she's cornered, she bites. The speech ended early. She skipped the slideshow she'd spent hours editing. Didn't thank the caterer. Barely acknowledged the people who flew in from out of state. She just wrapped it up, faked a smile, and vanished into the hallway like she was on fire. I let her go. There was no need to chase her. Not yet. Because her next move would say everything. And I'd spent 3 decades reading supply chains, tracing routes, watching for breaks. Now, I was reading her. And she was already about to snap. She slammed the door of the hallway bathroom hard enough that the frame shuddered. I waited outside, arms crossed, leaning against the floral wallpaper Helen had once mocked during the venue tour. Feels like a nursing home with a wine budget, she had said. And yet, she picked it anyway. Maybe because it felt sterile. Safe. Easy to control. She didn't realize this night had already slipped out of her control. 10 minutes passed. The sounds of distant clinking glasses, scattered conversations, and uneasy small talk floated down the corridor. The main room buzzed like a shaken beehive, half the guests pretending everything was normal, the other half looking for exits. Then, the door cracked open. She stepped out slowly, heels clicking on the tile like gunshots. Her face was washed clean. The red lipstick was gone. The flush in her cheeks had drained into something colder. She looked like a statue sculpted from rage and panic, gorgeous, unfeeling, and about to break. What the hell was that? She hissed, stepping in close. You blindsided me on my night. Your night, I said, almost laughing. You served me divorce papers in front of my friends, colleagues, and a guy from corporate who once called me a legend. You really want to talk about surprises? Her mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't expecting me to fight. Not really. In her mind, she had probably already storyboarded my reaction, shock, sadness, maybe a clumsy attempt to win her back. And then she would walk away as the tragic heroine, graceful in the face of betrayal that she orchestrated. Instead, I stood there like a man finally awake, the curtain peeled back. You brought him here, didn't you? I said. That hit. A flinch, so slight most people wouldn't have caught it. I don't know what you're talking about, she said quickly. Too quickly. Don't insult my intelligence, Helen. Don't accuse me of things in public, she snapped, jabbing a finger into my chest. This is already messy. You've humiliated me, Elle. No. You did that to yourself, I cut in. You thought you'd serve me up like a cold dish, humiliate me while you played the victim. But you forgot one thing. She stared at me. That look again. The one I hadn't seen in years, back when we used to argue about things that mattered, like money, or the IVF clinic she secretly canceled behind my back. You forgot I know you. Every tick. Every strategy. You tried to outmaneuver me like I was just another dumb husband with a pension and a blind spot. But this time, you picked the wrong day. Her face twitched. And then, like a mask cracking under pressure, her voice changed. You're pathetic, she said coldly. Still trying to play the righteous man. You think just because you held a job for 30 years, you're some kind of hero. No, I said. I think I'm the man who's about to show everyone exactly what kind of woman you are. Her lip curled. If you go through with this. You'll what, Helen? I stepped forward. Lie? Again? Tell the room I'm abusive? That I cheated first? You're out of cards. That IRS guy? He's not just here for show. I gave him access to the offshore documents. You remember those? The ones with your signature next to mine. She paled. You moved our money without my consent. You laundered it through consulting fees. To him, I assume? She blinked hard. And there it was. Confirmation. Not words. Just silence. Guilt echoes loud when it's cornered. I leaned in. Tell me, Helen, was this your plan all along? Milk me dry. Leave. And start a new life with your little zoning consultant? Maybe get a fresh passport? A new last name? Did he promise you that? She said nothing. Then she tried to slap me. It wasn't theatrical, it was desperate. But I caught her wrist mid-swing, gently but firmly. I looked her in the eye and saw, for the first time in years, fear. Real fear. You're scared, I said softly. Because for once, you're not in control. I let go of her hand. She stepped back like she'd touched a live wire. You don't know what you're doing, she whispered. No, I said. You don't know what I already did. She didn't speak again, just turned and walked briskly back toward the party. And I followed, one step behind, as she re-entered the ballroom. But this time, she was the one being watched. And the next act hadn't even started yet. She moved through the ballroom like a queen returning from exile, head high, jaw tight, eyes scanning the crowd for cracks in her illusion. But she wasn't fooling anyone. Not anymore. The mask was slipping. People had seen the way she rushed off stage. The way the IRS agent showed up like he'd just clocked in for work. The way I stood beside her, calm, collected, while she looked like she was seconds away from choking on her own performance. Whispers bloomed like weeds. I heard fragments as we re-entered. Offshore account. Did he say the IRS? She filed for divorce here? She didn't address the crowd again. She just walked straight to her little circle of trusted sycophants, those 3 women from her yoga class who thought they were cast members on a Bravo show. She leaned in, fake laughed, nodded, gestured toward me with a theatrical sigh. They looked at me, then back at her. One of them whispered something into her ear, and Helen's smile snapped into place like a loaded weapon. I could guess the plan. Damage control. Make me look unstable. Claim I overreacted. Frame the IRS agent's presence as a routine inquiry. Gaslight the entire room into thinking I was some bitter, paranoid husband unraveling on his big day. But I didn't give her the chance. I walked to the mic. No hesitation. No dramatic pause. The room went silent faster than I expected. I wasn't going to do this, I began, slow and calm, but since we're all being so transparent tonight, I think a little clarity is in order. Helen turned, rigid. We've heard from my wife, I said, so now let's hear from me. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone near the back, maybe one of the younger guys from IT, muttered, "Oh, S***T. I spent 35 years building a life. Not just a career. A life. One I thought was shared. I was wrong. The words didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. Over the last year, while I was planning for retirement, someone else was planning something else. A slow siphoning of shared funds, private trips, hidden expenses, and eventually a man who doesn't belong in this room. There it was. The hook. Every head turned. Not to Helen. To him. Zoning consultant. Mr. Tan's suit. The one who had spent most of the night trying to blend in with the floral arrangements. He froze like a deer in fog lights. Would you stand, sir? I said. Not a request. A demand. He didn't move. I said stand. He rose slowly, adjusting his jacket like it might shield him from what was coming. You've been seeing my wife for how long now? Gasps. Audible this time. Chairs creaked. A fork clattered to the floor. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. This isn't. 2 months? 3. I asked. Or did it start when you approved that zoning variance that just happened to triple her consulting fees? Helen stepped forward, furious. Tom, enough? This is a private. No, sweetheart, I cut in. You made it public the second you handed me divorce papers on stage. You wanted a performance? Here's the second act. The IRS agent, Dawn, was still standing at the back, arms folded, eyes locked on Helen and Mr. Zoning Department. I pointed straight at the man. My wife funneled money through that account under both our names. And according to the latest statements, at least $43,000 went to a company you own. Under a different name. Murmurs became a buzz. Disbelief, shock, disgust. Helen's face was fire now. Red, boiling, shaking with fury. That's embezzlement, I added. Tax fraud. Possibly bribery. I'm not the expert. He is. I nodded toward Dawn. But I know enough to say this. I didn't come here to be humiliated. I came here to retire. You tried to ruin that. And I'm just returning the favor. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, from the back. Holy hell, someone whispered. Another guest stood. A man from accounting, I think. He clapped. Once. Then twice. And slowly, others followed. It wasn't an ovation. Not yet. But it was something. Helen stood frozen, lips pressed tight. And then, finally, she spoke, not to me. To him. You told me this was untouchable, she hissed. You said there was no paper trail. He stared at her like she'd just spoken in another language. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But this was far from over. They still thought they could spin it. Still thought this was salvageable. And that's why I hadn't dropped the real bomb yet. The one she didn't see coming. Not even close. She didn't follow me when I left the stage. She just stood there, rigid, mouth slightly parted, as if her brain had short-circuited mid-sentence. Her boyfriend, Mr. Zoning, Mr. Untouchable, had sunk halfway into a chair, eyes darting around the room like he was trying to find the emergency exits in a submarine. And I walked straight to the bar and poured myself a whiskey. No soda this time. No act. Just me and the burn in my throat to remind me I was still alive. Behind me, the conversations reignited, only now they weren't polite. They were buzzing, electric, slicing through the false civility like broken glass. I heard my name again and again. And hers. And his. Someone muttered, she's finished. Another voice. Did you see his face? And then, cutting through them all, this is better than cable. I didn't speak to anyone. Not yet. I needed her to make her next move. I knew Helen. She didn't sit in silence. She regrouped. Retaliated. Reinvented herself. She wouldn't crumble in front of a crowd, not unless she had no other choice. And right now, her choices were shrinking fast. Don had already taken a seat near the wall, tapping on his phone, probably lining up the documents I'd sent him last week. Digital trails, wire transfers, names of Shell LLCs. All of it lined up clean. Helen might have been smart, but she got sloppy with love. 10 minutes passed. Then I saw her storming out of the venue, heels cracking against the tile, dragging her purse behind her like it was filled with bricks. She didn't even look at me. She just made a beeline for the parking lot, her little council lobby boys scrambling to catch up behind her like a lost in turn. I gave them a 5-minute head start. Then I walked out too. Not to stop them. Not to chase them. I had no interest in hearing excuses or watching her spiral. I just wanted to see it for myself, how she unraveled when no one else was watching. I found them by the cars. She had backed him up against her Audi, finger jabbing into his chest with every word. Said it was clean, Brian. She was snapping. You said there were no flags. No traces. That you'd scrubbed it. So his name was Brian. Of course it was. I did, he stammered. I used my brother's firm. It was, Jesus, Helen, I didn't think he'd go full FBI on us. You absolute idiot, she hissed. I gave you everything. I covered for you. That variance? The donations? The board seat? I buried the reports for you. And this is how you repay me. He looked genuinely scared now. Like he was realizing he hadn't climbed into bed with a woman, he'd climbed into bed with a python wearing lipstick. You said we'd be in the Caymans by October, he said, voice small. Helen laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a sharp, broken sound. The Caymans? You still think we're leaving? I took a step closer. Quiet. Measured. She hadn't seen me yet. You think this is over? She hissed, low and cold. No. No, Brian. This is just getting started. Because if I go down, you go down with me. You understand that. You signed those forms, he snapped. And you drafted them, she spat. I cleared my throat. They both froze. Helen turned first. And for the first time that night, her mask wasn't just cracked, it was gone. Followed us, did you? She said, her voice like poison with a smile taped over it. No, I said. Just wanted to see the two of you in your natural habitat. She opened her mouth. I cut her off. I sent copies to the State Ethics Board, the Planning Commission, and your firm, Brian. He paled like someone had flipped a switch inside him. And Helen, remember that condo in Florida? The one you listed under Sunset Horizons LLC? Yeah, your signature's on the lease agreement. I made sure the IRS got that too. For once, neither of them had a comeback. So I walked past them. No theatrics. No rage. Just the calm that follows after a storm you planned for. But as I reached my car, she shouted, You think this makes you better than me? I turned back. No, I said. It just proves I was never anything like you. And then I got in, drove away, left them standing there, screaming at each other in the dark. But this story? It wasn't over. Because what I had planned next, that was the part she'd never see coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I sat in my study with the lights off, the glow of my monitor painting everything in that cold, digital blue. The same chair, same desk, same old leather blotter I'd used since we moved into this house 22 years ago. The walls still held pictures from a life that didn't exist anymore, vacations, anniversaries, a New Year's Eve kiss frozen in time before everything rotted beneath the surface. I stared at those images for hours, not because I missed her, but because I wanted to understand just how long she'd been faking it, how deep the performance ran. I tried to find it in the way she smiled and how her hand gripped my arm. If the betrayal had always been there, buried behind clever eyes and compliments that now felt like weapons. At 2:18 a.m., I started printing. Documents, logs, statements, screenshots. I laid everything out like an investigator mapping a crime scene. I wasn't just getting justice anymore. I was making a case. Helen thought this was over, that she could disappear into legal mediation, drag out the divorce until public interest waned, cut a quiet deal, and slink into a new life with some renamed assets and a downgraded luxury condo. But she had underestimated the one thing I had more of than she ever knew. Time. Retirement wasn't an ending. It was a transfer of energy, and all of mine now had a singular focus. By morning, I had a plan. Step 1. I booked a meeting with the County Ethics Review Board. Anonymous tip. Packet of documents mailed overnight. I knew how slow government wheels turned, but I also knew how fast they spun when media got involved. Which brought me to Step 2. Step 2 was Rachel. She was a reporter with the local affiliate. Investigative. Dogged. Back in 2019, she broke a story about embezzlement in the school board, took down 2 trustees and a superintendent. She and I had crossed paths before. She interviewed me once during a budget crisis when I was the only manager who stayed at the shipping center during a strike. She respected facts, but more importantly, she loved fire. And I had matches. I sent her a message. Got something big. City planning, ethics, fraud, money trail. And it's hot. Very hot. You want it? 10 minutes later, she replied. Where and when? By noon, I was sitting across from her in a corner booth at a diner we both liked. She had a recorder, a notebook, and that wolfish glint in her eye. I gave her names, dates, scans, Helen's name, Brian's connections, the shell companies, the zoning decisions that led to suspicious land purchases. I didn't hold back. She sat back in the booth, eyes wide. Jesus, this is explosive. It's all real, I said. She raised an eyebrow. And what's your angle? Revenge. I looked her straight in the face. Justice. And clarity. She nodded. All right. I'll verify everything. If this holds, it'll run front page. It will hold. We shook hands. I left the diner lighter than I'd felt in months. And then, for the first time in a long time, I went for a walk. No destination. Just streets I'd driven down 1,000 times, now seeing them with new eyes. I wasn't the man I was 2 days ago. Hell, I wasn't even the man I was yesterday. That man had been gutted and reborn in fire. Let Helen try to spin this. Let her cry to her lawyer and post filtered vacation selfies to prove she was living her best life. Let Brian change his number and pretend none of it touched him. They were standing on a fault line now, and I was still digging. That evening, I got the text from Rachel. It's real. Everything checks. I'm running it. Tomorrow. And at the bottom. You want your name in the story? I stared at that line, then typed back. No. Let hers be the only one they remember. The storm was coming, and this time it was carrying her name on the wind. It dropped the next morning like a bomb strapped to a megaphone. The headline took up half the front page. Zoning scandal uncovered, planning board consultant and alleged mistress linked to tax fraud and embezzlement scheme. Helen's name was in the subheading. So was Brian's. And beneath them, the word investigation. The article was brutal. Rachel hadn't held back. She outlined everything fake LLCs used for funneling payouts, the shady land deal approvals, backroom connections between Helen's consulting firm and the city contracts she advised on. There were quotes from unnamed sources, people who used to work under her, one of Brian's former aides, even a retired board member who said he'd been pushed out after raising questions about irregular permits. Every word was surgical, clean, devastating. I sat at the same diner, sipping black coffee, watching people read it. They weren't just flipping through, they were consumed. Heads tilted, fingers pointing. One guy read it out loud to his buddy between bites of bacon. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Coworkers, neighbors, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Everyone suddenly remembered how to spell my name. But I ignored them all. I had one message to send, and it went straight to Helen. I didn't say a word. I just texted her the front page photo. No caption, no punctuation. Just the headline image, like a death certificate with her signature on it. 10 minutes later, she called. I didn't pick up. She called again. And again. The fourth time, I answered. She didn't speak right away. Just breathing tight, frantic. Then, "You bastard. I warned you," I said calmly. "You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to end a 35-year partnership with a spotlight and a mic. I'm just finishing the show. You destroyed everything." "No, Helen," I said, leaning back in the booth. "You did. I just made sure everyone got a good seat." She launched into it then, rapid-fire rage mixed with trembling panic. Legal threats, pleas, blame. I let her vent. Let her burn off the smoke. Then, when she finally went quiet, I said, "You think I wanted this? You think this feels like a win?" Silence. I wanted a quiet retirement. A few good years. Maybe fix up the cabin. Maybe finally take that damn trip to Montana. But you couldn't let me have that. You had to turn my final chapter into your launch party. I didn't mean she started. You meant every move, Helen. The papers. The venue. Bringing your side piece. And now, you're shocked that the stage collapsed under you? You built it over a landmine. I could hear her trying to steady her breathing. "You ruined my name," she whispered. "No," I said. "You wrote it in poison." I just handed out the pens. I hung up, and that was the last time I spoke to her. Because within 2 hours, the city council issued a statement. Effective immediately, Helen Crowley's consulting contracts with the planning department have been suspended pending investigation. By sundown, Brian's LinkedIn page was deleted, and 3 journalists were camped outside his office. But that wasn't the part that satisfied me. The moment that did? Around 4:45 p.m., I got a call from Don, the IRS guy. He spoke in his usual deadpan, like he was reading a grocery list. "Hey Tom, just wanted to let you know we've initiated the freeze on the Sunset Horizons account." "Both of us locked out?" I asked. "Correct. And audits moving forward?" "Oh, it's very forward. Someone's already asking about extradition." I thanked him. Hung up. Then I walked to my garage. Pulled down the old canvas. Rolled it back. My fishing boat. Dusty, half forgotten, smelling of pine and old motor oil. I'd bought it 15 years ago, back when I thought weekends still belonged to me. I ran my hand across the hull and smiled. Because now, they did. She tried to disappear. Of course she did. Within 48 hours of the article hitting, Helen vanished from her condo, closed her social media accounts, and changed her number. Poof. Like she thought she could just ghost the scandal. Reinvent herself in some other state. Maybe under her maiden name or whatever alias she and Brian had cooked up during pillow talk between wire transfers. But it was too late. The fire was already raging, and her name was gasoline. The city launched an internal probe. Brian's firm denied everything and threw him under the bus with a press release so fast it must have been pre-written. Helen's old clients started lining up to review contracts she'd touched. And someone leaked a voicemail from her to Brian, recorded just hours before the party, where she says, "We'll blindside him. He'll cry. He always cries." That clip made its way to a local podcast and went viral in under a day. Suddenly, it wasn't just a city scandal. It was content. My face was never in the news, just like I asked. But everyone knew. And that was fine. I didn't want their sympathy. I wanted silence. Stillness. And I finally had it. For the first time in decades, no emails. No deadlines. No dinners with someone who secretly resented I was still alive. Just me, the boat, and the sound of wind brushing over the lake like a secret being told for the first time. But peace has a way of making space for reflection. And with that space came a question I hadn't had time, or maybe courage, to ask myself. How long had I been dying before she finally finished the job? That marriage, it had been on life support for years. I saw it now. The missed anniversaries weren't just coincidence. The excuses, the way she always chose separate vacations, the way she stopped laughing at my jokes, but still used my stories at her fundraisers like we were a team. She'd been preparing for the exit longer than I'd realized. Her betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It was strategic. It hit me one night, out on the water, watching the sun burn down behind the trees. She hadn't fallen out of love. She'd outgrown pretending. But where she chose deception, I chose clarity. Where she tried to run, I stood still. And that was the difference that unraveled her entire blueprint. Still, something inside me itched. A thread I hadn't pulled yet. There were 2 names on that account. 2 signatures on the paperwork. 2 people guilty in the eyes of the law. But only one of us had the foresight to document everything. So I went to my safe, unlocked it, and pulled out the envelope I hadn't shown anyone. Not Dawn. Not Rachel. Not even my attorney. Inside were transcripts. Emails. One in particular stood out. It was an email from Helen to Brian, dated a year ago, subject line. Let's keep him calm until it's all ready. And the body? He's too loyal to suspect anything. I'll draw it out, keep him happy. Once the account's emptied and the new LLCs are clean, I'll serve the papers. He'll fold. He always folds. But here's the thing about folding. Sometimes it just means you're waiting for a better hand. I forwarded the email to Rachel. No context. 5 minutes later, she called me, didn't even say hello. Tom, are you sure you want to go nuclear? And I said, no, Rachel, I want to go historic. Because the final chapters weren't about justice anymore. They were about making damn sure Helen never gets to rewrite her story. And I still had one last move. One she would never recover from. The call came at 9:17 a.m., 2 days after I forwarded that email. It wasn't Rachel. It wasn't Dawn. It wasn't a lawyer. It was a producer from a national network. He introduced himself, talked fast, like someone trained to land interviews between scandals. Said the story had reached their newsroom. The local angle was already explosive, but the personal betrayal? The political corruption? The IRS freeze? That was prime-time bait. He wanted the exclusive. I didn't say yes. Not yet. Instead, I asked one question. Would you air the recording? Silence on his end. Just for a beat. Depends what's on it. I told him. Everything. The voicemail. The emails. The offshore trail. And the kicker, an audio file recorded the night before the retirement party. Helen, drunk. Talking to Brian. Saying, tomorrow I'm going to destroy him in front of everyone. He'll sob. He always sobs. And then we'll be free. He's just a relic, tired, sweet, and stupid. Sweet and stupid. That word, relic, played in my head for hours after I first heard it. Like I was some antique gathering dust, something to be mocked behind closed doors and auctioned off for scraps. But now the relic had her entire future in his hands. And I wasn't going to use it for money. I was going to use it for truth. I sent it all. The full packet. Redacted only my personal financials. Let the rest bleed. The producer promised me 2 things. Anonymity and reach. I didn't care if people knew my name. I just wanted her name carved in scandal. The segment aired 3 days later. Prime time. 40 minutes long. A slick, professionally edited expose with voiceovers, expert interviews, public records, even drone footage of the properties involved in the shady zoning deals. And at the end, Helen's voice, raw and crystal clear, giggling in the background of her own downfall. The internet lost its mind. Within hours, retirement party betrayal was trending. Memes popped up. TikToks. Reactions. A lawyer broke down the financial crimes line by line on YouTube, calling her a walking indictment in heels. A parody account tweeted fake quotes from Helen like, "Who knew betrayal could cost this much in penalties?" I didn't watch it live. I went fishing instead. Just me and the lake and the silence. But when I got home, my inbox was full. 2 legal firms asking if I wanted to join a civil suit against her. A woman from Minnesota thanking me for standing up, said her husband had cheated and no one had believed her. And then A message from Helen. Just one line. "You've ruined my life." I stared at it, not out of pity, but because it was the first time she'd ever told the truth. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She had planned to walk over me, stage her little drama, cry at the right moments, and vanish with her lover and a tax-sheltered fortune. Instead, she was now a national disgrace. Her face was frozen across 1,000 screens, not as a victim, not as a professional, but as a warning, a cautionary tale. And yet, the final blow still waited, because even though her name was in shambles, I hadn't yet told everyone what was buried inside the account. Not the public, not the media, not even Dawn, because there was a secret, one Helen never knew I discovered. And in the final part of this story, I was going to say it, out loud, in front of everyone. The final card had sat untouched in my desk drawer for weeks. Not because I didn't know what to do with it, but because timing is everything. I waited. Let the fire spread. Let her name melt off her office door. Let the city disown her. Let her boyfriend lawyer up and then roll over under pressure. Let the podcast vultures pick apart her fall. Let the court dates pile up. Let her feel small. And when the noise began to fade, when it looked like she might quietly slip into some new identity out of state, when the press moved on and the pity parties turned cold, I lit the last match. It happened at a quiet press conference. Rachel set it up. No media circus. Just a single mic, a room of journalists, a seal of officiality behind me. I hadn't spoken publicly yet. People speculated, wondered. Some even doubted the level of her involvement. Surely she didn't mean for it to go that far, they'd say. But that's the thing. She did. And I had proof. I stepped up to the mic, steady as stone. "I want to thank everyone for being here," I began. "I never wanted this. Not the attention. Not the headlines. I wanted a quiet retirement. Instead, I got a storm. Not because I broke laws, but because I believed a lie for too long." I looked down at the folder in my hands. Opened it. "This," I said, holding up the printed pages, "is a record of every transaction made from the Sunset Horizons account. Every deposit. Every withdrawal. Every entity paid out." I flipped a page. And right here, dated just 6 months before she served me the papers, is a wire transfer. $94,000. To a private clinic in Zurich. Under an alias. Traced. Confirmed. The reporters leaned forward. One began scribbling furiously. "The clinic specializes in elective identity reconstruction and offshore document manufacturing." She wasn't just leaving me. She was erasing me. Erasing herself. This wasn't a divorce. It was an escape plan. I let the room digest it. She was preparing to vanish. To drain the account, rewrite her identity, and disappear. And I was just the last loose end. A single voice in the back asked, "Why are you revealing this now?" I looked right at him. Because I wanted her to watch it all fall. Piece by piece. I wanted her to live in the collapse. Not avoid it. Another question? "Will you be pressing charges?" I shook my head. Already done. The IRS was handling the financial side. DOJ was circling for interstate fraud. And the city? The city had quietly begun severance lawsuits to reclaim every penny they'd paid her through bogus contracts. I closed the folder, stepped back from the mic, and left the room. No victory speech. No gloating. Just finality. 3 hours later, Helen was arrested at a rental property outside Flagstaff. Fake ID. Fake name. Real tears. I watched the footage once. Just once. Her being led to the squad car in yoga pants and a hoodie, face down, hands cuffed behind her back. No crowd. No screaming. Just silence. Fitting, really. Because that's what you get when your whole life is a performance. And the stage finally burns. As for me, I never looked back. I sold the house, donated the retirement clock, bought a new rod, a better boat, and moved out west. Small lake town. No HOA. Just water and sky. Sometimes, when I sit on the dock in the morning, I think about how close I came to walking into that party like a fool. How she smiled that day like the whole world was hers to control. Now, her world fits in a prison cell. And mine is wide open. Quiet. Still. Free.